Live. All right. Thank you, everyone that's here present today for African Liberation Day, City of Dayton Celebration 2022. We have a special guest today, but I want to just start off by saying that this year has had so many challenges, yet it has had so many blessings. And I'm just thankful for everyone who helped to make this day possible. The City of Dayton, Commissioner Shanice Turner Sloss, Commissioner Fairchild, all of his aides and assistants. Thankful towards Kettering Health, who helped to make this possible today, and all the many citizens of Dayton, Ohio. A special thanks to Graphics Terminal and Janelle Berry, Malik Akbar, and Mike Motley, who I call my right-hand man. Thank you so much. Thank you, Baba Crow and Mama Olabisi and Mama Nazipo for taking all my phone calls to help bring our book to fruition. Mike, could you hold up the souvenir book? We have this wonderful souvenir book that we have put together that we hope that you all join us tomorrow as we culminate these activities with the parade right here from Gem City Market at 9:30. We're going to leave from Third Park, take off at about 10, walk down the street to Liberation Park because we are free and we can do that. So that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to have a full day of festivities, drumming, libation, and history about African Liberation Day and why this day is so important for us to recognize, remember, and celebrate each year that we have this opportunity. And remember, this is African Liberation Day, not Africa Day, African Liberation Day. Keep the freedom in there because that is what this is about. This is about an opportunity for us to free our minds, free our pockets, free our time. We need to seize the day. The time is now, and we are the ones we've been waiting for. And we have another one that we have been waiting for that is here joining us, Dr. Kaba Kamene. So I don't want to take up that much of his time because he's going to provide us with some lecture and some question and answer. And feel free, Dr. Kaba, to frame this how you want. But thank you so much for joining us this African Liberation Day 2022 in West Dayton.
My sister Kenya, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for all of our conversations over the past a month and a half, I believe, in preparing for this great day of African Liberation Day. And to the family that has come out to be a part of this and the family that will be a part of this tomorrow, I just send my salutations from your family here in New York City to let you know that we have common minds and that we are progressive in our thoughts. And liberation is there. And one of the things, particularly having worked with children, just in terms of my background, for some that may not be familiar with my background, I'm an educator. I've been an educator here in New York, retired from the New York City Board of Education in 2009. And I began teaching in the Bronx in 1979. So I retired, and well, you know, some people call it retire, but I call it graduation, because what I'm doing now and sharing this information with my family here in Dayton and those environs that are participating in this event. Retirement in education for me doesn't exist. I call it graduation. July of 2009, I officiated over the school that I retired from, a middle school in the Bronx. And as I officiated over the 8th grade, they asked me to say something. And what I told the children is that I was graduating with them. Just as they were graduating out of the 8th grade, I was graduating out of a plateau in my life that I've thoroughly enjoyed. And what becomes so important, family, is when you look at the concept of African education, as I've studied it. I've just not studied what to teach about Africa, but I've studied the methodology of African teaching, which from the most ancient of days to even to today's way of teaching, in every community, every village, every hamlet, however we want to break the community down, the purpose of education was to make the children better than us.
Right.
It was for them to take what we had done to the next level and to make it better. And so my method of teaching has always been to teach to a genius mind, to teach to a mind that already knew what I was going to teach them. I come from a background of education. I consider my teacher the main teacher in my life. I have two. But the main one that I spent most of my time with in my development, I met when I was 12 and a half in a presentation that was given in Harlem. And his name was Professor John Henry Clark. And I've always considered Professor Clark's methodology. He called it talking in a circle. But I studied his method of teaching. And I have a piece that I do on my webinars every Tuesday, and it's called Teaching in a Circle, to help us understand holistic learning and the way in which the original mind works. And again, I could say African mind, but there's something I want to say. I want to be very careful how I'm about to say this. There is no such thing as an African-centered curriculum. It really doesn't exist. Because when the original teachers, the African peoples, first began to teach the community and the children, the only people they were teaching were Africans. They didn't say this is African because everybody was African. However, today, the reason why I embrace the term African-centered education, African-centered curriculum, is because other cultures came in on us, stole our legacy, put their name on it. And so African-centered education now, for me, is more that I am reclaiming what has been stolen from us. Whether we're talking about 4 major teaching areas, which is language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. They stole that from us.
Right.
And they put their name on it. And so now when we see and we think about the Socratic method of teaching, we think a Greek named Socrates did it. First of all, we don't even realize Socrates was black, but that's a side point. But when we think of Socrates, we think of a Greek. We think of somebody that is not of the African culture. When we think of Plato, when we think of Thales, all of the scholars that are given credit for everything they've done, we all need to get a book called Stolen Legacy by Dr. George G.M. James and study his legacy. We need to study the work of Professor whose work come to us through a colleague of his named Dr. Joseph Harris. The Pillars of Ethiopian History is one book. And Africa and Africans is seen by the Greeks and Roman scholars. To understand that when the Greeks were going into Ethiopia, they were saying they were returning to the land of the gods, where the perfect people. And so we reclaim our culture, our history, and we teach it to our children and to our community. But we as African American, and I understand that, and I'm very proud of my African American heritage, because before my name was Kaba Kamene, it was Booker Taliaferro Coleman Jr. And so I have always been deeply steeped. My parents got married in December of 1945 from my father's church. It was in Harlem, the Mother AME Zion Church. The pastor of the church was Reverend Dr. Benjamin Robeson, brother to the great scholar, actor, activist, Paul Robeson. So I've always been steeped deep inside of African American culture. And I've dedicated my life to working with my brothers and sisters, elder and younger. So I want to make that clear. So whether we call ourselves a foundational Black American or ADOS, the American descendants of slaves, I can understand that. And I'm proud of the African American culture that I live by. But I am a Pan-African through and through. I realize that no one group of Africans anywhere in the world is going to get out of this by themselves. It is, as Dr. John Henry Clark said, Pan-African or perish. And although I look out for my own people, I encourage Ghanaians to look out for other Ghanaians, Yorubans to look out for other Yorubans, Akan to look out for other Akan, for Puerto Ricans to look out for Puerto Ricans, Jamaicans look out for Jamaicans, because the stronger you make your cultural group, the stronger we will all be as a whole. And so as we approach this, we have got to clear the paralysis out of our analysis. And we have to get to a point in our lives where we have no distractions, as we can see from what's happening. We also have to realize something else that I think is extremely important. We as an African people better get ourselves together. Because whether we realize it or not, if you look at history, the Eurasian ethnic stock, and by the way, Europeans are not a race.
Come on.
They're an ethnic stock. There is only one race on the planet, and that's the human race. And that human race was conceived, born, nurtured, sustained, educated, civilized, and technologized in Africa. And when Africans got their show together, then they took it on the road and peopled the planet. And because of climatological events, such as the Ice Age, that African had to mutate and develop into an organism that could survive his and her environment. And when we study melanin and carbon, then we come to understand certain things about who Europeans are and who Asians are, and why in this world do they act that way? What makes a people who have just about 98% of everything want the 2% that other people have? One of the most important things that happened in the early human, the Twa Mbuti people, because that's what we're talking about. The original family came out of what we call Central and Southern Africa. They are who we today call the Twa Mbuti, the Khoisan of Southern Africa. The Twa Mbuti of Central Africa, the Khoisan of Southern Africa. They were one people. They are derogatorily called the Pygmies. And they are made fun of and ridiculed. But what we don't know is that if it wasn't for them, none of us would be here today. The Egyptian Kemetic civilization was built by the Twa people. The Kushite empires were built by the Twa people. And once we understand this history, then we'll understand that about 2000 BC, when the ice melted and Europeans came back across into the southern world, from that point to this point, they have never maintained a civilization longer than 500 years. Ever. If you want to look at the first civilization, because we're not even going to go to China, because we know that the Shang dynasty, the Tang dynasty were all African. We know that the Japanese culture came into existence when Kushites brought Koreans onto the islands and met the Ainu people, who were the Twa and Mbuti people, who had already peopled that area for thousands of years. And so we're going to start with 525 BC, when Cambyses, the Persian, or today's Iran, entered into Kemet and conquered it. 525 BC. By 333 or 331 BC, the Greeks were there. So the Persians were only in power for about 181 years. And then the Greeks came. And then by 30 BC, the Romans were in. So that's a little over 330 years that the Greeks had power. And then the Romans had power from 30 BC to about, I'm going to be generous, 426 AD, but they were falling by 330 AD. But let's give them a little bit more time, 426. So right there, you're dealing with, what, 456 years that the Romans had power. And then after the Roman Empire, Europe went into darkness. They fell apart. It was the fall of the so-called Roman Empire. And they wouldn't come back into nothing would be going on in Europe until about 711 AD, when Africans, known as the Moors, went in and brought civilization back to Europe. And so from 1492 until this day, this is what we've been dealing with. And this is falling now. I call this the fall of the Omen Empire.
Mm-hmm. Omen?
It's over now. And by nature of climatology, depigmented people are dying out. They're on their way out. They're on their way out because of melanoma. You know, what's interesting is that in their own arrogant ignorance, they are not understanding if anybody should be paying attention to this concept of global warming, it should be them.
Right.
Because the numbers of skin cancer amongst them have skyrocketed. In Australia, they have a slogan that they put up on posters as you drive in the streets. Slip, slap, slop. That's their slogan. Slip, slap, slop. Slip on a t-shirt, slap on a hat, and slop on some suntan lotion.
Mm.
If you want more information, family, because I'm going to give a lot of books out, family, because my thing is, I don't want people to believe me. I mean, I know what I'm saying. I've got the research, but I don't want those that are listening to me to come from the perspective that they believe what I'm saying. I just want you to think. This is what I used to tell my children in the classroom. I want you to think. And I also want to give you the books that I've researched that will take you to this information. Now, I'm telling you, just because it's in a book don't make it true, because I read a lot of books that are total untruths. But through research and study, get the book Saving Your Skin by Barney Kennett and Patricia Lawler, Lawlor. Barney Kennett, Kenet. This book wasn't written for people who have melanation. This book was written in 1994 for people who didn't. And I remember it was right about this time in 1994 that I was passing a Barnes and Noble, and the entire display case outside as you walked in the street had this book, Saving Your Skin. And it said, this is a must read for this summer. And what they were trying to warn depigmented peoples to do is to understand the ravages of melanoma, or what happens. See, Dr. Richard King and Dr. Patricia Newton and Carol Barnes and Frances Cress Welsing and all the great scholars, the melanists that have taught us about what happens when you have melanin. Saving your skin is a book that will tell you what happens when you don't have it. And that book wasn't written for people of melanation, wasn't written for black folk. It was written for them. And I've always been one for going into other people's camps and study what they're about. And that's a book that should be in your library. I know I'm doing business for them, but I think the information that you will derive from this, you'll get a sense of what's happening. If anybody should be concerned about global warming, it should be them. But they're denying it for political and economic reasons. I understand. But you're signing your own death certificate by ignoring the fact that melanoma, see, as melanated people, when we go to the doctor for our annual checkup or whenever we go to the doctor, doctors don't do to us what they do to them. When you are of European descent and you go to the doctor, your annual checkup, you got to strip from head top to shoe stop, and they check your body for melanomas, which are skin cancer lesions. And the way they know skin cancer lesions, they call them the ABCDs. The lesion is asymmetrical, or it's uneven. It has borders, which is the B. It's a different color, and the diameter, ABCD. This is science, family. This is why we got to get into science. We have to study.
That's right.
Because they're dying out. This is why they're doing what they're doing. No matter how we feel about voting, I'm going to put that to the side. No matter how we feel about voting, military science tells me that when you're at war, what you want to study is the one thing that your enemy, your combatant, wants to take from you.
Right.
Because it's whatever he or she is trying to take from you, which is one of the greatest weapons that you have. And so, this last election in 2020 sent shockwaves through the country. With everything they tried to do, the lies, the steals, the cheating, what they came to realize was they were outnumbered.
Mm-hmm.
And in being outnumbered, they realized the only way they could maintain power was to go after the vote and to instill fear in the black community. Because as it relates to all of the other communities in America, wherever you may come from, to my brothers and sisters from Central South America, the Caribbean, Africa, or even Europe, how goes the African American is going to be how you go.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've lived in the belly of this beast for over 400 years. Nobody knows this beast better than us.
Right.
And even though you may have come from an oppressive country, the beast in America is different from the beast all around the world in their own way. And we know this beast.
Right.
And we understand what it is that we have to start to do to move forward in all of the dimensions. And I think of Dr. Neely Fuller and what he talks about, the comprehensive code of white supremacy. I think of Frances Cress Welsing when she talks about the idea of genetic annihilation. This is what we're talking about here. I just did a webinar the other day on this. To understand that not only are they dying out because of melanoma, but they're also dying out because of drugs. See, they came after us with drugs, but it wasn't until they became addicts that people started saying we got a drug problem in America. See, they put us in jail, but they started clinics for their own. But it's too late. The young are dying from meth, and the elder is dying from opioids. So they're dying out not just from melanoma, but also because of the drugs. But there's a third reason why they're dying out. And I'm talking science. There's an article that was written in the New York Times by Sabrina Tavernisi, June 20th, 2020. And the title of it was, there are more people dying, because she wasn't going to say white, because it would never have been published. But that's really what she's saying when you get into the article and when you get into other books that I'll tell you that you might be interested in. Whether we realize it or not, in 26 states of the United States, there are more people of European descent dying than being born. For every one of them that dies, 6 will not be born. This is just science, and there's a reason for it. And the books that I would recommend that you read, first of all, you can start with Pat Buchanan, the Republican that ran for president. Minister Louis Farrakhan recommended that we read a book. One time there was a Savior's Day conference where he recommended that we read a book by Pat Buchanan. It's called Death of the West. I recommend that we get that book. I got that not only physical copy, but I got that on Kindle. The second book that you want to read that came out before his, that he put a lot of his research in, is titled The Birth Dearth. Birth as in birth, B-I-R-T-H. Dearth is D-E-A-R-T-H. Birth dearth. There's something that is called in demographics, in demography, which is the study of populations. They have something that they call the TFR, the total fertility rate. And the total fertility rate says that in order for a civilization, for a people to continue in a civilization, you have to produce, every family should produce, and this is a crazy number because they get into decimals, 2.6. Okay, but that's how they think. They think in decimals and fractions. They break stuff up. However, let's make it a little bit easier. Because if the number is 2.6, then let's look at 10 families. 10 families should produce 26 children. 10 times 2.6 becomes 26. So every 10 families should be producing 26 children. The European population worldwide is only producing 1.6, which means for every 10 families, they are not producing 10 children. And every generation that continues doing this, do you know the one country that more women have abortions than any other country in the world? Russia. You know another country that's very much in trouble? And mind you, all this went down before the pandemic. This went down before the pandemic. So that the pandemic brought their numbers down even more. And again, like denying global warming, they denied that there was a virus. Now, whether or not you trust the vaccine, once again, that's a whole nother different conversation. I'll put that to the side for the moment. But something was going through our country. Something did go through the world. There was a virus that killed people. How we dealt with it was a whole nother thing. But here's the reason about the TFR, the total fertility rate. And by the way, you know, I'm not sure if it's happening in Dayton, it's happening in New York, it's happening in Chicago, it's happening all around the world. It's called regentrification.
Mm-hmm.
You're beginning to notice that there's a lot of people of European descent coming into the black neighborhood.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Say that.
Now, you have to ask yourself why. Why are they coming into the? It's because their towns in Ohio and South Dakota and other places, they're dying out.
Mm.
They're ordering up their towns. People are leaving. That's why you see a lot of people that are regentrifying are young. Because the elderly people are dying out. And the people of European descent in European communities are not moving out. So where else can you move but the black community? Because you can move the black folk out. That's the cause of regentrification. And while we're talking about this is called Le Grand Remplacement. It's written by Renaud Camus in France. They're talking about the Great Replacement. It ain't the Great Replacement. Europeans are the Great Replacement. Europeans replaced the indigenous people in America. Europeans replaced the original people of Australia, New Zealand. Europeans replaced the Palestinians in what was Palestine at the time. They're the Great Replacement. But they're dying out now. So it's not about that fact that they're being replaced, it's that they're dying out. And the numbers of melanated people are growing. And that's just the way science tells us. I did a 4-part webinar series. I just finished number 3. The next one is the psychological analysis using the work of scholars such as Dr. Richard King, the great melanist and psychiatrist, the work of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Because family, we have to understand what we're experiencing. We have to understand what we're experiencing. Because without that, we're not going to understand what's happening. Because I'm going to tell you something else, even though folk may not really understand this. We are better off today than we've ever been in the history of our presence since, let's say, if you want to say 400 years ago, if that's the date. We're better off today than we've ever been before. The fact that we're doing this, the fact that we are celebrating African Liberation Day and can come to each other from New York to Dayton, Ohio, we are in a better position today than we've ever been before. And I know that may be hard because so many of our people are going through great challenges right now. And I respect and I understand that, family. But the reality is if we just keep on keeping on, when you stop and think of our ancestors on the plantation and what they experienced, when you think of what they went through, and yet still they kept on keeping on because they saw a better day. They weren't experiencing it, but they saw it. They imaged it. They imagined it. And when our ancestors on the plantation imagined that day, when they saw that day, they literally were spiritually manifesting us into existence. And I'm asking us to manifest our future and to look into the future. Don't have a plan for today, tomorrow. I have a 100-year plan. I have a plan where I image or I imagine where our people will be in the year 2122. Our ancestors on the plantation in 1822 imaged 200 years of where they would be in the year 2022. And when you're thinking about your ancestors, I did some work with a brother who is a PhD in mathematics. And it's called the exponential expansion equation. Exponential expansion equation, triple E, or E to the third power. When you think of your ancestors, and if you consider a generation to be 25 years, you go back 20 generations. Basically, if you go back 500 years, if you go back to the year 1522, and you think of your ancestors, each and every one of us. If you want to know how many ancestors it took to bring you into existence, everyone around that table, myself here, every human being, but I'm speaking to Black folk now. If you go back 500 years and count how many ancestors you have that brought you into existence from 1522 to this point, it took 1,450,000 48,576 human beings to exist to bring you into existence. So the next time you think you're alone, think about that. And fam, I only took you back 500 years. What happened if I took you back 5 million? And sisters, when your grandmother was born, she was born with the egg that she would produce for your mother. But if that were true, when your grandmother was born with the egg of your mother had your egg. Just let that percolate for a little while.
Right.
Each and every one of us has always been in existence. And it can be traced back to mitochondrial DNA. Also, brothers, the Y chromosome can be traced back also. We have been around for a very long time. It just took our mommy and daddy to come together. And if I may call it like this, astronomically, it's called the Big Bang. When our parents had a Big Bang, we were produced. And so the same way the cosmos came into existence is the same way every human comes into existence. And so as we move forward on African Liberation Day, we have to understand the future wealth of the planet is in solar power. Solar power. When you look at this war that's going on between Ukraine and Russia, I call this World War III. Nobody want to admit it, but it's World War III. It just ain't hit the United States yet as it did in the past 2 world wars. But when you look at the power that Russia has over Europe, that manipulating, negotiating tool that Russia has over Europe, it's that 40% of Europe's energy comes from Russia. Solar power is the future wealth of our planet. And it is in that solar power that we have to teach our children about the sun. Right now, we ought to be creating after-school programs because I'm tired of the borders of education. Okay, I've been in one. I work with some, and I'll be honest with you. Not only do they not want to teach our children, but we're the only people that allow other cultures to teach our children.
Right.
Because in New York, when the Irish took over New York, they made sure they became the teachers of the Board of Ed. When the Italians took over, they made sure that they became the teachers. When Europeans of Jewish faith became the population, they made sure they became the teachers. And now here we are. We need to be on a crusade in our high schools to be encouraging our children to become the future teachers. Because how goes the society is how goes the school system. And when you have teachers who are 23 years of age, female, European, in our classroom with our young brothers and sisters, they don't even know who they are. How are they going to teach our children? They don't even really teach the subjects that they went to school to teach the children. Now,
Right.
I've met some great teachers of all cultures, so please know I don't speak in absolutes. I'm just saying we got to get ourselves together.
Yes.
Solar power is the future wealth of the planet. And we ought to have after-school programs. I've got curriculums. I've got the books. And I've taught the children. There was a group of students in San Francisco that developed through a brother that was very knowledgeable about solar power. They were building, they took attaché cases and opened them up, and they would create solar panels in attaché case, put them in their backyard, the sun would come, and the house would have solar power. Do you know how much it would cost if you worked on solar power? Do you know how much it would cost to have this program on computer, to wash your clothes, to cook your food, to light your house, to run your water? Do you know how much you would pay for that? Zero. Solar power is free. That's why the pyramids were built. Solar power. This is us. Which we're teaching our children subjects that will not do any good for them in the future because it's a business. First of all, when you go to college, I've taught college 14 years. When you go to college, I was in the Black Studies department. I taught Introduction to Africa, and I taught a course on Malcolm X. When you go to college, there is no reason why you ought to be studying a course on chemistry unless you want to become a chemist. Right. Because your high school chemistry class should have taught you everything you needed to know about chemistry. The chemistry book that they have in college is bigger, thicker, and more expensive, but it's the same book you got in high school. Physics, the same thing. They have all these courses that they mandate you take. Why? Money.
Right.
Say that.
Physics is business.
That's what it's an edu-business, family. There are certain subjects that once you get to that 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old level, there are certain things that you don't need to study no more unless you're going to be specific in that subject area. Only reason why you should study biology in college is if you're going to become a biologist or a doctor. There's no real reason for you to study that because in high school was the area where the children should have found their divine gift. By 13, 14, 15, when you get into puberty, when you get into that concept and your mind starts to grow and you start to mature, you ought to have an apprenticeship program. That's what the right to pass programs were in Africa. That is where you were, after you came out of your right to pass program, you were assigned a mentor. I don't like that word, but I'm going to use it. We understand what that means. You were assigned an elder that you work with. Like, believe it or not, when I came out, when I met Dr. Clark when I was 12 and a half, so he sort of kind of became the person that I looked to for teaching. It wasn't until I was older that I really got close with him. But I first introduced him when I was young. But in college, it should be a different course of study. There are certain courses you should not take, but it's business, it's money. But no matter what you learn, you ought to become professional no matter what you do. Computer analyst, bus driver, FedEx driver, whatever you do, you ought to be introduced to solar power. So in your home, you don't pay nobody. That's why they call it Con Ed. Because they're conning you.
Right.
This is why they don't want the electric cars and the solar power to come forward, because they know that they will lose their entire money system. We're going to have to get up off the earth soon. We're going to have to get up off of the petroleum. We're going to have to get up off of fossil fuel. And by the way, fossil fuel ain't nothing but carbon anyway. Everything that runs the world, starting with carbon, then to melanin.
Okay.
And so, family, I realized that we had a 45-minute on and 45-minute question. I think I've presented enough. May I say to you to go to my website, www.kabakamene.com, KABAKAMENE.com. Download my free e-course and study guide. I also have other materials. I've written 3 books. They're all on Amazon, but they're also up on my website. Professor William Leo Hansberry, Spirituality Before Religions, because we have to understand where all them religions came from. Because whether we realize it or not, the Black Baptist Church is nothing but a rebirth of African spirituality. And my final book is Shabakistone, which merges the Old Testament with the New Testament and shows you where all these religions came from. Shabaka Stone is nothing but a rewritten version of the Assyrian drama that was written by our ancestors that spoke about the resurrection of the soul. It's us, family. You know, everybody always say, you know, every time you talk like everything came from Africa. You know what I tell them? It did. Everything came from Africa. So with that, family, I'd like to just pause here. Sister Kenya, I'd like to give you the floor to direct the questions, the comments. Thank you again for this invitation. I just am so in love with our people. The more I study us, the more I fall in love with our resilience and our strength and everything they did to us. Still we rise. And it ain't over till we win. Solar power is the future wealth of the planet.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaba. We just thoroughly enjoyed your presence, and we have some people here. I'm sure they may have some questions. Actually, one of our winners from our Wakanda Art Contest is here, and I definitely wanted to recognize her presence. Just a brilliant young lady. And you said a lot about our young people, and so I just want to jump in with the first question. Particularly about solar power. I really believe that solar power is, definitely it's the essence of our future. Mike Motley, who I often say is my right-hand man, but he really is my both-hand man because he tells me everything to do and I do it. A legend in the city, and I respect his authority and his thought. And he talks about solar power and how we can really use solar power to go into this next age. And it's interesting you would say that's what our children should be studying. Like, that's more important. And especially even switching over from the coal. We know that dirty coal is how diamonds are made. That's why we named our organization C.O.A.L, Coalition on African Liberation, because we believe that we're going to press some diamonds out of this city and we're going to identify some jewels. And we have those jewels in the room today. But I wanted to ask you about alternatives to coal. With us not having control over the riches in Africa currently, how can we move forward? Brother Steve here is already constructing those solar boxes. I believe we have the keys to the kingdom with that. But with coal and alternatives to coal, how can we move forward with that thought in our young people?
Let me recommend that you get a book by a brother named Michio Kaku, Michio Kaku. He wrote a book, The Physics of the Future. And in this book, he talks about the fact that a civilization is only as great as its source of energy. We know for a fact that our ancestors understood the research, because economics really doesn't mean money. Echo comes from the Greek word oikos, O-I-K-O-S, which means home or environment. Like ecology is the study of your environment. Economy is the knowledge of your environment, because agriculture was so important to us. And all of our wealth was drawn from the ability to advance agriculture. And the concept that I see is that there is power in water. It's not just fossil fuel. There's power in water. There's water power. There's air power. And, you know, the windmills and things like that. It was Africans that brought that into Europe, the windmills. You know, even though the Dutch get credit for the windmills, Africans brought it into Holland. And so you can derive your power, but the power of the sun, the first level of power is the earth, which is what we're doing now. Fossil fuels, gas, natural gas, they call it. It's not natural gas. You know, it's forced. You know, it's like somebody brings something down your throat and you regurgitate. That's what we're doing to the earth right now when we're trying to get these resources, and the earth is regurgitating. But the idea is that there's only so much fossil fuel on the earth. There's only so much water on the earth. There's so much gas. There's so much wind that you're going to get. But when you get the solar power, it's eternal for now anyway. And when you can derive that power, it makes everything on the earth work, period. And so what I recommend to our community is don't trip out over trying to get this in schools. We spend all our time going to schools, fighting and arguing with them about what they need to do. I'm telling you right now, we already got the curriculum in place. We don't need them. What we need is us. We need church groups, your organization, and even martial arts schools. I did work in a martial arts school in Houston, where he had the children come in after school. They did homework, and they did martial arts and physical education. And the brother thought that they needed some culture, so they brought me in to do a cultural program for them to develop this cultural program. I've done programs on solar power. I am not a solar power expert, but I can lay the groundwork for the understanding of it. And what I want to say is something very simple. Isn't it interesting that everywhere that the earth, that the sun shines the brightest, the people are the most melanated? Isn't it interesting that wherever you find the sun shining hard, the people are black? It's like the Creator put the wealth in our backyard and said, use it. What we have to do is have a 20-year plan. Nothing is going to happen overnight. So the brothers that you mentioned in the room there that are doing solar power, that are doing the solar boxes, support them. Give them the resources that they need to be able to expand their program in an after-school setting, in a church. Okay, you go to Sunday school, but let's go to solar school, because Sunday is Sun's day. That's where the word came from, Sun's day. Monday is Moon's day. Tuesday is Mars' day. Wednesday is Mercury's day.
Yes,
Thursday is Venus. Friday is Venus's day. But you got to go back to the Latin language to understand. Martes is Mars. Wednesday is miércoles or Mercury. Okay. Thursday is jueves or Jupiter. Friday is viernes or Venus. Okay. And sábado.
Saturday.
Okay.
Saturday.
What? Saturn's day. See, it's right in front of us. And that's because Europeans didn't realize there were 8 planets, but that's a whole nother side story.
yes, sir.
Africans understood that. They didn't name the days of their weeks that way. First of all, our ancestors
Yeah, the volume up.
had a month of 30 days and 3 weeks of 10 days. They had a calendar of 10 days, 9 days, and 7 days. The 7-day calendar is a agricultural calendar. Our ancestors actually had a leap year after every 1,460 years. And you can do the math on this. See, we have leap year where we add a day every 4 years. But in Africa, they literally added an entire year after 1,460. Do the math. Divide 365 into 1,460.
Right. We have a question. Okay. Baba Crow.
Oh, all right. Dr. Kamene, I wondered how you can sign my book. I brought it with me. My Kingsbury book, but I thought you'd actually be here. But in lieu of signing it, can you just tell us a little bit about William Leo Hansberry?
Wow. Professor John Henry Clark, when I was doing my master's degree, my first master's degree, Dr. Clark recommended, because he knew I was a staff developer and that I wrote curricula. And he said, you should always do work. Again, going back to, you should always study things that you can use and need. There's a Moorish proverb that says, if what you learned you can't use, you wasted your time learning it. And so William Leo Hansberry in 1922 developed the first African studies program in an accredited college. And from 1922 until 1959, when he retired, he developed his curriculum. The second master's I did in education, I looked at how he developed the Department of African Studies. That very few people, even in Howard, know who he is. I went to Howard to the Department of Education. My brother Kemet Shockley, Dr. Shockley, invited me to speak. I did it dedicating to William Leo Hansberry. Not one student in the room and the teachers did not know who William Leo Hansberry was. There was a couple that knew, but nobody knew who he was. You wouldn't even be, we would not, he was a contemporary of Carter G. Woodson at that time. Carter G. Woodson developed what's called Negro History Week. William Leo Hansberry developed the courses that taught. We don't even know who William Leo Hansberry was. And so I felt that the reason why I wanted to write that book on William Leo Hansberry was to bring to our community an understanding that before, on my level, in order to understand something, you have to know its roots. You can't understand the tree if you don't understand its roots. Because whatever happens to the tree, if you don't know the roots of how it came into existence, how can you treat it? And so not only did I write my second thesis, that book that you have there, my brother, is a combination of both of my theses. The first part is the history and life of William Leo Hansberry, and the other was his curriculum that he developed. And what I'm saying is that in June of 1925, he had a phenomenal workshop series at Howard University that there is nothing that we're developing today that he did not do back then. That's how powerful that brother was. Not only that, but I was encouraged to start writing books. And it is an African tradition that before you even start anything, you do libation to the ancestors.
Mm.
And that book is an intellectual libation to the architect of America's African Studies program. The next book that I would write was Spirituality Before Religions. And then the next book that I wrote would be Shabakistan. But before I started writing my books, I paid homage and respect to my ancestor who made it all happen. And that's who William Leo Hansberry was. When I think that I'm having a difficult time, I invoke and evoke the spirit of William Leo Hansberry. I got it made compared to what he went through. What that brother went through mentally, physically, spiritually, and soulfully, I pray for that spirit to embrace me so I can get to the next day. And he has fortified me in all that I've done.
That's powerful. We have another question, Baba Kaba, from Brother Steve Muhammad.
Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum assalam, my brother Muhammad.
Yes, sir. My question is, you know, the two theories that are out today, right? The critical race theory, and the other one is the great replacement theory.
Yes.
And so we see this, what you could describe as a palpable fear from white people, a real fear that I think that Black people are underestimating. Can you talk, because the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said as his world gets closer to the end, he'll become more and more violent, more and more savage.
That's right.
Can you talk about those two theories and try to put them into context as far as how we as a people should be on red alert? Because we see what happened down in Texas.
That's it.
Ukraine.
And you know, family, to my brother Muhammad, while we're speaking about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I recommend everybody read his book, The Fall of America. I mean, if you really want to understand that brother was writing back then what he could prophesize would happen now. Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael once told me, he said, brother, let me tell you something. The closer you get to the creator, the closer the devil will get to you.
Mm-hmm.
What we're seeing happening now is their end. And if you think there's something now, you ain't seen nothing yet. These folk are desperate now. Genetic annihilation, what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing was saying scientifically is here, family. Okay, Bobby E. Wright wrote a book the psychopathic behavior. Look at how they're acting, family.
All right.
Look at how they're acting. And that tells you everything you need to know about who they are. This is why I'm doing that 4-part webinar, to understand their origins and where they came from and what they're about and what they're about to do. You know, Cronus, it's called the Cronus Complex. But when a lot of people study Greek mythology that came from Africa, they don't understand who Cronus was. Cronus was Zeus's father. In the African story, Cronus is Ra, the sun up in the heavens, the power of the sun. And Zeus was a Sar, and Hercules was Heru. And the Cronus Complex says, I will do, because Zeus wanted to kill his father. He wanted to kill Cronus. And he wanted to undermine Hercules. That's why he gave him those 12 challenges. Zeus was not a nice person at all. Not to mention that he took advantage of a young girl who gave birth to Hercules. But the Cronus Complex says, I will do better than my father and make sure my children cannot do better than me. The African concept is, I will do better than my father and make sure that my children do better than me. To which the father Ra says, that's why I brought you into existence. To do better.
Shame.
See, we have the type of personality where, you know, what built the pyramids also put us on the plantation. And absolute trust and love. We just didn't know who we were loving and trusting when they came amongst us.
Right. Right.
And we got to know the difference between an ally, a friend, and an enemy. Because an ally, we'll give you an example. Malcolm tells the story that in World War II, Russia and China were our friends, and Germany, Japan, and Italy were our enemies. After the war, Germany, Italy, and Japan became our friends, and Russia and China became our enemies. We hang on to allies too long. We tend to think allies are our friends. And we don't realize that your ally, after the deed gets done, your ally can become more of an enemy to you than the enemy you both came together in alliance to fight.
Wow.
We hang on to ally, and see, we don't realize we don't need them. They need us.
Ashe.
The other thing that is very important to understand is that once you put yourself in a position of needing somebody else, you are automatically in a subservient position. Because without their help, you wouldn't be able to achieve your goal. When you come even and you let them know, we can come together, but just realize I don't need you. I can cut you loose anytime, and I still get my goal. I'll ally myself with you. I will ally myself with you because I believe we all should move forward together.
Right.
But you're acting cute with yourself, I will cut you loose. And we should have the power to be able to do that, as opposed to holding on to them and having to deal with that nonsense because we don't believe we can do this on our own. And they've been on our backs the whole time. Every group that has gotten their rights have gotten their rights on the back of Black people.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you
Professor,
so much. Woo.
And please, what I say, don't believe me, just look.
Right.
Look at what has happened over the years. And
Brother,
sister, the last chapter in my book, Spirituality Before Religions, I wrote the book Spirituality Before Religions to get people ready for Shabaka Stone, which was my third book, but I also wrote it to make people aware of where we are right now and to understand where we are and what we're experiencing. We are moving into the age, Africans called it, well, we call it the age of Aquarius in the Western world, but the Africans called it the age of Hapi. this is the age of the feminine energy. This is the age of the woman. For the next 2,160 years, women are going to run things.
Don't you forget it.
And brothers, what I'm saying is that our role in this is to be beside them and assist them.
Please.
No one gender is more important than the other.
Correct.
Let's be real about this. This is one of the problems. So when I raise the woman in terms of knowledge and wisdom, for us to understand her role for the next 2,160 years, I'm a man. I'm proud to be a man. I know my role. And my role is to assist her as she has assisted us. And together with ma'at, balance and harmony and justice, we'll make this happen. But this is the age of the woman. This is why you see sisters rising all over the place, from Africa to the Caribbean, Central South America, here in the United States. That's what you're looking at with Stacey Abrams.
That's right.
And Sister Kenya, to get this program together, who did I speak to? I spoke to you.
Speaking of powerful women, Mama Olabisi is here, and she tells me she knows you.
Okay.
You're her friend. She has a question for you, Mama Olabisi.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you for being here. Every time that I have the opportunity to hear you, I am enlightened. The last time I saw you in person was in Orlando before the pandemic, and that was a wonderful, wonderful session. I was amazed at the energy that you had because you were going from one event to the next event to the next event, and you just didn't seem to run out of energy, and I was just trying to keep up. But my question is about origins. I'm always interested in beginnings. I appreciated your comments about the koi and the san and the twa, because I think that anytime we can understand beginnings, then we can get the order of things understood a little bit better. And I was wondering if you could talk about the origins of people in North America, the so-called Native Americans, if you can talk about that.
Okay. My sister, thank you for the question. It is good to see you again, even though it's not in person. I look forward to visiting Dayton in the future. So I look forward to that person-to-person contact. And brother, with my book, I definitely will sign it. You know, I think of the concept, I say a prophet is not a psychic. A prophet is just a good historian. Because when you know what happened in the past, you can interpret what's happening in the present, and you can predict what's going to happen in the future. Not because you're a psychic, but because you're a good historian. I think of origins always going back. And again, my books went back to the origins of spirituality, the origins of religion, and Shabaka Stone went back to the beginnings before the beginning began, before existence existed. What existed before existence existed? And I used a metaphor. I brought my grandson to a toy store, and he was into Nerfs. And I saw that there was a slingshot that was a Nerf. If I had known that this question was going to come, I would have had the Nerf with me right now to show you what I mean, but I'll demonstrate what I mean. When you have a slingshot, the purpose of the slingshot is to project something in front of you. The further back you go with that object in the sling, the further back you go, the further in front you're going to project that projectile. The purpose of going back is not to stay back there. The purpose of going back is to project forward. And that's how I see your question. The further back we can go into origins, and I'd like to take your mind and put it in the intellectual slingshot. The further back your mind can go in origins, the further into the future you can project yourself. When you understand the Twa Imbuti, when you understand that the Twa Imbuti was a group of human beings that came out of the group Homo sapiens sapiens. When you look at the origins of the human being, and I know that many religions don't roll with this, but I'm an African, so I got to say it the way I see it. We came out of the mammalian stage. First, there was bacteria, and then there was plant, and then there was fish, and then there was amphibian, reptile, and then mammal. Each came from each other. Each was a growth of each one. I go deep in spirituality before religions on this topic. In the mammalian stage, there was an organism, some people call it Ramapithecus, and it was in a tree. Some Ramapithecus remained in the tree, and some, for whatever reason, came down on the earth and began to walk on the earth. And because of that, they had to develop a new way of living, particularly in terms of food, because when you're in the trees and you're living, your basic food is coming from the trees. You might jump down sometimes, get something, but you go back up in the tree. But when you're on the ground, you have to start looking and developing. And what happened is that Ramapithecus split. The ones that remained in the tree are called Pangids. The ones that came down on the ground are called hominids. Out of this hominid group came this is Dr. Sheikhan, the Diop civilization or barbarism, did a phenomenal job in his book. You have the Australopithecus robustus that then became the Australopithecus gracile. Australopithecus gracile became Homo habilis to Homo erectus to Homo sapien to Homo sapiens sapien. Out of this group of Homo sapiens sapiens, the creative thinkers, came the Twa Imbuti people in Central and Southern Africa, in all of the countries. Because remember, the countries that we now have names for didn't exist before 1885. The Berlin Conference carved up Africa by Europeans and gave them all them different names. But before that, Africa was a much different place as it relates to nations and dynasties and families. So you're looking at what is today called the Democratic Republic of Congo. You're looking at Namibia. You're looking at Southern Africa. You're looking at that area where the first human beings came out of, and their first mode of living was hunting and gathering. From hunting and gathering, they then went to fishing. From fishing, they then went to agriculture. And from agriculture, they then went to technology. But agricultural science was the cornerstone to the movement of people. I'm going to ask you a question. If all of your supermarkets and restaurants and places where you get your food closed at 8 o'clock tonight, could you eat?
Yeah.
Now, here's the example I give you.
Tonight.
When I worked in the Board of Education,
At 8:01.
sister that was part of the nutritional staff. And in this nutritional staff, she and her sister had a little house in the Bronx that had a little backyard. And they knew I was vegetarian. They knew I liked salad. So sister would bring in cucumber and lettuce and things from she and her sister's backyard. I had a friend, have still, that worked down on Wall Street. And this brother had some boku bucks. He had cheddar on his cheese. He had a whole bunch of money. But if I posed that question to both of them, it would be those two sisters that had a little garden in the back that would survive.
Right.
And that brother with all that money, it's green, but you can't eat it. So power is the ability to be able to feed yourself. And when you eat better, you think better. When you think better, you eat better. And that was the development that would later create Kush, Kemet, all of the great civilizations. But the origins of that greatness was the Twa Imbuti Khoisan that went through the process of the basic hunting and gathering, fishing, agriculture, agricultural science that became technology, and then all the things that would come from that. Now that I just covered billions of years.
Yes,
I
sir.
hope that answered your question, my sister. Did you have a follow-up for that?
Well, to a certain extent, because I was interested in North America.
Oh, that's right. My bad. Well,
The new,
that's why people came to America 100,000 years ago.
thank you.
The first group that came were the Twa and Buti. They peopled the planet. The second group that came is known as the Clovis Folsom. They were a taller stature African. The
Mhm.
third group was another African that really stayed more in between what we today call Canada and North America. They were called the Algonquin.
Mhm.
The fourth group is known as the Inuit or the Eskimo. The fifth group, now this is where the large pool of people come. The Native American that we see today, for the most part, they absorbed all the other four groups. That's why they call the red man.
Mhm.
Because you know there had to have been a stark difference in complexion. Because when Europeans came here, they call them red. The indigenous call them pale face. So there had to have been a real difference. So this Hollywood thing you see now with Native Americans, and you see many Native Americans. Look, I have 5 bloods that run through me through the Native American, 3 from the north and 2 from the south. So I'm not trying to put anyone up or down, but know your history. Understand that you were part of the Mongol invasion. Genghis Khan and them went to war and pushed those people of Asia down into America. They're the ones that came through the Bering Strait. And they're the ones that we see today. The ones that are less pigmented, because many of them are very dark. And they're the ones that you see with very straight hair. They are the ones that created that blend of the first 4, because the first 4 didn't come in the numbers that the 5th group came in. And so the indigenous people that we see today, the Arapaho, the Apache, the Cherokee, well, anytime that any Native American group could have a European as their chief, you know you got a problem. My father's Cherokee, but I don't admit it. I am. And Choctaw. My mother is Narragansett, Onondaga, and Pequot from the north. But until they embrace the Great Spirit, I don't think I want any part of that right now. And when you can elect a European, as far as I'm concerned, I like Elizabeth Warren. I like her style. But she ain't a Native American.
No.
The people in that room right now are more Native American than her.
Wow.
Thank you.
I know people don't particularly care to hear that, but guess what? I threw a rock in a pack of dogs, and the only one that yelped was the one that got hit.
I was a member in a Christian church, and one of our mothers used to say, "It's the truth, anyhow."
Right.
It's the truth. I have a question. I'm sorry.
Truth knows truth.
Ashe. So I have I have a few questions. I'm gonna ask you a 2-part question if you can answer. I'll repeat the second part if you need me to after you answer the first part. So you had mentioned regentrification, and Unified Power is one of the members of C.O.A.L, the Coalition on African Liberation, and we are working to stunt gentrification. But I've heard the term regentrification. Are you calling it regentrification because there has been another return after white flight, that happened around in the 60s? Did this happen before? Why is it regentrification?
Because the first one was when they came to this country 400 years ago.
Wow.
They're doing the same thing today that they did 400 years ago to the indigenous people that were here.
Wow.
Now, I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of times people perceive regentrification a little bit differently. Like it's more updated. Just like a Renaissance. Okay, they talk about the European Renaissance, but to have a Renaissance, a rebirth, you have to have a birth. So the Renaissance was the same thing that the Naissance was when the Greeks sat before the Africans. That was the Naissance. The Renaissance was when the Europeans sat in front of Africans post 711 AD. See, because as a historian, as someone that looks at history cosmologically, my timeline is much wider. I think in billions of years. Like I don't think 100 years. This is why my plan for our community is a 100-year plan. You know, people say, oh, I'm getting ready for tomorrow, or I'm getting ready for my children's generation. No, I'm getting ready for generations that will not know that I am their great, great, great grandfather.
That's
Or
powerful.
they know that I am. But what I'm saying is that I'm planning for generations to the powers that up 100 years from now. My generation to the 5th power, to the 6th power. I'm looking in the future because we have to look into the future. Because if you keep looking what's in front of you, you can trip. I'm looking for a 100-year plan. I see every one of our homes with solar power. I see, in fact, again, if you go to the last chapter in the book, the future, the female energy in the universe is magnetism. The male energy is electricity. When electrical currents are created, magnetic fields are created. When magnetic fields are created, electrical currents are created. Electricity lives for magnetism. Magnetism lives for electricity. That's why we call it electromagnetism. The future is magnetism. They already got magnetic. People are going to be driving on magnetic roads in the future.
Ashe. See that.
You know, and not only that, but the magnetic roads are going to be elevated off of the earth, and you'll be driving on them.
Yeah.
And the example is just look at a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It'll be a modified kind of thing, but we're going to be in the air. There's going to come a time when everybody going to have an airplane.
Okay.
Just like there was a time that everybody didn't have a car.
Right. Right. I always say I want to be the first person I call West Dayton, Wakanda. I want to be the first person in Wakanda with a flying car.
Well, you know, Wakanda already existed.
Ashe. Well, teach that then.
What Wakanda already existed in Kush Kemet.
Oh, but not currently in 2022. When you look around, you don't see any Wakanda.
I see the potential for Wakanda.
Ashe.
That's why I do what I do. See, we have forgotten Wakanda. We didn't lose it. We forgot it. Because when you lose something, it means you got to go out and find it. When you forgot something, all you got to do is be reminded.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different psychological concept. See, words are very important to me.
Yes.
Particularly the way they're defined. And so when I tell children that white supremacists, well, first of all, that's an oxymoron because there's nothing supreme about white. In fact, in science, everything white is recessive and everything black is dominant. I'm just saying, I'm science.
Teach.
So the concepts that we're dealing with, Sister Kenya, and to family is the reality that we have the same potential that our ancestors thousands of years ago created Wakanda. That same DNA is in us. We just forgot it. Power is the ability to define someone's reality and have that person accept that definition as if it were their own. They have taught us to look at ourselves as primitive. And we look at ourselves, some of us, not all of us, some of us look at ourselves that way, thinking that thought came from us. I don't want to do business with black folk. Black folk do bad business. Don't you know we taught the world business?
Say that.
We taught the world how to do business.
Okay.
Your question?
Yes. So the other question I had was that I had listened to one of your videos and you talked about how melanin and the universe are related in terms of the infinity of space, and space is black and light is only here on Earth. And you talked about the moon, and sometimes you're the sun, sometimes you're the moon, and how the light from the sun reflects onto the moon. I would love for Chanel, her sisters and brother and her mom and the community here to hear that explanation of the universe from you.
Even in the holy books, it says, in the beginning, there was darkness. Right there, you're talking, but you see, melanin is a molecule on Earth. What you have to deal with is carbon. And carbon is a byproduct by the implosion of something in the universe called nanodiamonds. Nanodiamonds, when the darkness, the dark matter, is pushed in on itself by dark energy, and there is no more space that they could be pushed in, it implodes. The implosion creates the stars. Stars are crystallized blackness. Just like coal is crystal, diamonds are crystallized blackness. This is science. And so when carbon on the earth, organic life, there are 4 basic atoms: hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. Hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen can only be put together no more than 4 atoms at a time. You can put 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, you have H2O, you have water. You can put 2 parts hydrogen, 2 parts oxygen, you have hydrogen peroxide. You can do the same thing with nitrogen, but you can't put no more than 4 atoms together. They don't stick. But once you introduce carbon to that mix, you create the billions of molecules that exist. Carbon is the cosmic glue. Now, out of that carbon effect, if you're living, even if you're not living, you have assimilated carbon. Carbon creates life, period. Carbon, in creating life, created another product that is a molecule, which is what we call melanin, which is a molecule. Carbon is an atom. And I always try to, when I talk to my children in school, I always try to, because you can get mixed up between an atom and an element. And you can sort of kind of get confused. I'm going to take you to an ice cream store. An atom is the flavor of the ice cream. Okay, vanilla, chocolate. Now, a molecule is the scoop of ice cream, chocolate ice cream. That is the element that came from the chocolate atom. But if I wanted to mix strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate, 3 scoops, that's the molecule. Children can understand that. Because when you teach the periodic table of elements in chemistry, people don't understand, like, well, you called it an atom and then you called it an element, so what's the difference? But the atom is the flavor. The ice cream scoop itself is the element, and the molecule is when you bring more than 1 scoop together.
So how many chemistries do I need to take to understand that?
No, my book.
Just read the book.
Well, the book will take you to the books that you need if you want to do extra reading. Family, this is not difficult. We created science. And sisters, let me tell you something. You created math and science. The African woman created math and science. And you say, why? Okay, necessity is the mother of invention. Why would a man have to start to count? A man has no reason really to start to count. I mean, you can look at the sun, things like that, but it don't dawn on you, so to speak. But why would a woman? Because internally, a woman must prepare for her monthly cycle. And so in Africa, the woman began to count her days as to when her next cycle was going to come. And she also realized that her cycle came in 4 different forms, 4 different concepts. You know, when you're going through your particular phase, there are 4 different phases in a woman's monthly cycle: 28, 29, 30-day cycle. That's math. She started to count because the common denominator in math is counting. That's the first thing we teach children in school, counting. And everything from there, what we call number sense, becomes addition, subtraction, multiplication, finding the common denominator, algebra, all the rest. Okay.
Wow. Thank you so much.
But hold on. Here's science, Sister Kenya. She looked
Yeah.
up in the heavens and she saw that there was a celestial body that also went through a cycle. And there were times that heavenly body had an impact on her. And it had a 28, 29-day cycle. And it also went through 4 phases. So from the language of mathematics, she then created the concept of the lunar cycle. And the lunar cycle is to science what counting is to math. And then men were introduced by the woman to math and science. And it wasn't until it got to the European and Asian that they took it over, put their name on it. But women were the ones that created math and science. They also were the ones that handled the economics of the community.
You said women are magnetism and men are electricity?
Yes. The energy. Okay. In men, we have a male energy through the Y chromosome. In women, you have the X, which is magnetism. And women are magnetic.
Yes, we are.
To the woman. And when you look at the atom, you see what they do is they tell you that the proton is male and the electron is female. That's not true. The proton is female with the neutron, and the electron that circles the nucleus of the atom is the male. Without the electron, the nucleus wouldn't exist. Without the nucleus and the proton and the neutron, the electron wouldn't exist. I'm not saying this to in any way consider that one is more important than the other.
Ashe.
Together we make this happen. That's the beauty of Ma'at, balance and harmony.
Okay. All right. Woo. That's powerful. That's a lot, right? Thank you so much. We have another question for you.
Sure.
Brother C. Brother C, one last 734. Okay. Might be able to squeeze in one more, but go ahead.
Oh, you can squeeze whatever you want to. Now that we're here, let's have fun.
Oh, okay.
That's what-
Stay in that shower.
So my question would be like an elephant in the room when it comes to most Black people, and that is separation. We're seeing today that, when we stop shaking up the jar of oil and water, that we see just the natural separation. And today we're beginning to see that as a people, that their culture is not congruent with our culture, is diametrically opposed. They see things as fractions, as you say, where we see things as holistic. Even when we look at medicine, they look at body parts where we look at the whole of the body. So my question on that is your thoughts on separation.
We already separated.
Right, exactly. And
Right.
can you speak then, because that was a quick answer, but can you speak then on melanin and how it is more valuable than gold? I was reading something where, a gram of melanin is more valuable than gold.
And that's by their measurement. You see, even to us as a people, gold had no value except it had durability. So the value of the statues that we created in gold, the gold was not the value of the statue. It's what the statue represented that was important, that we made it in gold so it would survive for all time. See, it's a different way of looking at the world. And it goes back to what you're saying, Brother Muhammad. It goes back to the fact that we think differently. Okay? You have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. Okay? Left hemisphere breaks things apart. The right hemisphere brings things together. The left hemisphere of the brain is your math, your science, and your analysis, your reasoning. The right side of your brain is your music, your art, and the analogical aspects. You have a bundle in the middle of your scalp, in the middle of your head, that's called the Corpus Callosum. That acts as a bridge between your left and right hemisphere. The problem with Europeans, even though we think in parts too through the left hemisphere, but we think in parts in order to create the whole. And the Corpus Callosum is what allows us to send these messages back and forth. We are holistic thinkers. The problem with Eurasians, because of the Ice Age and because of the permanent damage done to their pineal gland known as calcification, they can only stay in the left hemisphere. They can't go over to the right hemisphere because of the freezing. Their brain is freeze dry, just like a raisin is sun dry. A raisin really was a very plump grape. Put in the sun and the liquid was drawn out, it became a raisin. Well, when we went up into the ice, what was a plump pineal gland was freeze dried. You have three major glands in your brain. You have a pineal gland, pituitary gland, and optic thalami. Your optic thalami is responsible for your emotional growth. Your pituitary gland is responsible for your physical growth. Your pineal gland is responsible for your spiritual growth. And up there in the ice, the African was put into a catatonic state that brought them down back into the southern land with that mentality of separation. It was called xenophobia, fear of the foreign. We didn't separate from them, they separated from us. And the whole time now they're telling us that they told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that you're preaching separation. No, I'm living separation and only telling you what my experience is.
Right. Right.
Let me tell you another story as it relates to what you just said. And I think it's important as it relates to moving into the future, particularly for the young people who may be in the room. I went to an activity in the Gullah Islands in the 90s. It was called Kumbalamba. The great scholar Charles Finch brought us there. And this was the coming together of all the different peoples, all the diaspora. Just like what you're talking about, the diaspora, this was the diaspora coming together. We had indigenous Americans there. We had people from Africa there. We had people from the Caribbean there. We had African Americans there. All of us we all came down into the Gullah Islands for 15 days. And Charles Finch told a story in one of his presentations where, in preparing for this presentation, they went to the African village that was represented here from Senegal. And there was an elder there by the name of Madame Fatou Sek. She was
yeah.
One that Barbara owed this movie.
Okay. And there were all sorts of people that came, all sorts of Africans came. There were psychiatrists that came, there were ministers that came, there were computer analysts, every facet of the experience in America, every job that you could have, every concept you could have was there. And they were asking questions of Madame Fatou Sek and her group that were there. And they were asking different questions and she was answering and the people there were answering back and forth. And then they were picking up ready to go. And Madame Fatou Sek said, okay, hold on a minute. I'd like to ask you a question. And everybody sat back down and said, okay, what are we going here? And she said, when somebody has a mental problem, when they have a mental issue, who do they go to? And the psychiatrists and psychologists and the social workers said, well, they come to us because we are the doctors of the mind. And she said, when somebody is physically hurt, who do they go to? And the gastrointestinal doctor raised, okay, I'm here. The heart doctor, they come to me. The brain surgeon, okay, they come to me. And all the different doctors that were there in the medical field, they said, because we are the doctors of the body. And Madame Fatou Sek said, well, when somebody has a spiritual problem, who do they go to? And the ministers, the Muslim ministers said, well, they come to me. I am the one that guides in Islam. And the Christian ministers said, well, they come to me. I'm Christian minister. And they might have had some other people in different types of religions, Hebrew Israelites, things like that. And she said, okay. And it got real quiet. And Charles Finch said to Madame Fatou Sek, why do you ask? And she said, because when anyone in my community has any problem, mentally, spiritually, or physically, they come to me because I am their healer. We are living in a world of separation. because that's all the European understands is separation. We're not holistic. If you are a doctor, you should be a healer of the mind, the body, and the soul, and the spirit. If you're a minister, you should be a healer of the mind, the body, and the spirit, because spiritually, you help the body heal itself. That's why they call it the bedside manner of a doctor, coming in, talking to you in a way that makes you feel better about yourself, brings you to a higher level. And if you're a psychiatrist, what you do with that person's mind and body also helps them physically and spiritually. But because we're so separated, we're doctors of the body, doctors of the mind, doctors of the spirit, doctors of the soul. Where in Africa, you're a healer. And you heal mind, body, soul, and spirit. So make no difference. You work for FedEx. As you go on your route and you interact with people, you help them mentally, physically, and spiritually. If you're a secretary in a corporation, you're a healer. Every human is a healer, because how you present yourself and how you take your gift and bring it to the people is what heals each other. And I think that as we move forward, we have to go back into that holistic thinking that, yes, you have that left side where you say, oh, I can only see the trees. And then you have the right side that says, I can only see the forest. Or when you're holistic, you say, I see the trees in the forest, and I see the forest made up of trees.
Beautiful. All right.
I have a lag on my computer, but Baba, I just thank you so much. And I think you promised me this summer that you would perhaps come and visit us. And so I'm going to look for you this summer to hopefully come to Dayton for the first time.
Yes.
Maybe we'll have a flying car by the end.
Hopefully it won't take that long.
I look forward to it. My family, I look forward to it. And I'm glad that we could work this out, at least to have this sharing and African Liberation Day. But family, I just want to let you know, you are already liberated.
All right.
Is claiming.
Yes.
It's all in the mind. Once you visualize it, all you got to do is actualize it. Once you visualize liberation, you are free. It's just that you got to walk towards it.
Yes.
Your liberation isn't at hand. You are the meaning of liberation.
Yes.
You're free.
Yes.
And Bob Marley said, no one can curse who Jah has blessed.
That's right.
And the fact that we're still here, we're blessed, family. And I thank you for this opportunity. My sister Kenya, and to the Unified Power, and to all of you who are in attendance, I thank you for this opportunity. And I look forward to the future. Keep on keeping on. It ain't over till we win. And remember, solar power is the future wealth of the planet.
Yes.
Ashe.
All right.
Good night, everyone. Good night, West Dayton. Good night, Wakanda. Thank you.
All right.
One love. All right.
One love.